During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk a little about how much seed does a farmer plant per square foot. We get that question from time to time from non-farmers, but you know what? Darren and I don't really look at how much seed we plant per square foot. Quite frankly, I don't even remember what the number is for corn or soybeans or wheat or oats or any of the crops we plant on our farm. What we think more about is how we want to have our spacing pretty even, and we're shooting for a certain number of plants per acre.
Well, an acre is 43,560 square feet. So you can divide those
Right.
numbers out for yourself and figure out exactly where we're at. So like, for example, on corn, a lot of times on our farm, an average planting population is 30,000 seeds per acre. So that's not quite one seed per square foot.
Now, I'm glad you brought up corn first, because when you start talking about or asking the question, well, how many seeds do you plant? A lot of that comes back to the history on yield, the fertility we have in the field, and the potential we have for good yield. But then we want to take a look at what's our soil there too. So for Darren and me, almost all our ground is dry land ground. What that means is we don't have irrigators, we have no irrigation, so we're counting on Mother Nature. We're counting on God to deliver rain for us just when we need it, and unfortunately that doesn't always happen. So when we have light soils, what we would call sandy soils, those just simply can't tolerate dry weather very well. So what we do is we cut back our populations on those kinds of soils. On the really heavy, what we call good soils, we'll plant a thicker population. So we'll go down this year, I think we're going as low as 20,000 plants per acre on the light ground, and we're going as high as 38,000 plants per acre on what we would call the really good, highly fertile, heavy soil. And we can vary that population with the planter as we cross the field.
Now, one thing that you mentioned there, Brian, is depending on how much moisture you have in that soil, you may plant a few more or a few less plants. What I think about too, in order to conserve moisture, is spacing those plants out evenly and trying to get a crop canopy as quickly as we can.
So the big thing, what Darren was getting at, is having crop canopy. What that means is we get the crop to shade out the ground. Not only does that do better for us in terms of killing weeds, it also holds some moisture in that soil. So where we're dryland farming, we like shading the ground to trap moisture so we have a more humid canopy and more moisture in that soil so we get more yield.
Well, I think about it in a crop like grass, for example, like in your lawn. If your lawn is thin and doesn't have enough plants per square foot or per acre, as we talk about it, what do you have? You have more weed competition. You have other things popping up there that aren't your desirable grass. The same thing happens to farmers out in their crop fields.
So how do we ultimately determine, well, what population are we going to plant out there? How thick are we going to plant things? A lot of it, quite frankly, is trial and error. We do experiments all the time, and so do most farmers. They'll look at, okay, what are my neighbors doing? What's the university say? What's my agronomist say? And then you try things high and low. You say, all right, well, what's working, what's not? And we kind of go from there.
And the tough thing is one year the high planting population works the best, and another year the low planting population works the best. So it's not going to be always exactly the same. So yes, doing those trials is really good. And then most farmers, like Brian was talking about with our farm, we're going to vary that population out there, so we're spreading our risk. We'll have some areas that are a little higher population, some that are a little lower in virtually every field that we've got. So we take some of that risk out depending on what the year is. One area might be a little higher in yield, one might be a little lower.
Well, one thing we can do to always reduce our risk is control weeds, like our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?